Serious, what's the creepiest/disturbing thing that has happened to you at work? I never believed in ghosts. Not seriously. But after that night, I don't know what to think. It was a quiet, late shift at the storage warehouse where I worked. I was closing up, lights off, one lamp still flickering at the end of a long corridor lined with dusty metal racks. I heard the soft sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor behind me, slow, deliberate, like someone dragging something heavy. I froze. I slowly turned. Nothing. Just empty racks, still air, silence. I shook it off and kept walking toward the office to punch out. When I flicked the lamp off, everything went dark. Then, out of nowhere, a whisper. Barely above a breath, right behind me. Don't leave. My heart stopped. I turned again, still nothing. The whisper came again, but this time louder, more urgent, as if someone, or something, was right next to my ear. I was alone. I had locked the main door behind me. The warehouse was empty. My coworkers were gone. All the trucks had left for the day. I didn't run. I don't know why I didn't run. I backed slowly, almost moonwalking, toward the exit. The whisper came again, now angry, shivering the air. Stay? I snapped the door open, grabbed the handle, pulled hard, ran outside. I slammed it shut behind me, locked the deadbolt, and never looked back. I don't remember if I clocked out. Next morning when I got there, the big lamp in the corridor was smashed. Not blown, smashed. On the ground, shards of its casing, cracked glass, twisted wires. No sign of forced entry. No footprints. Nothing. They replaced the lamp. I quit the job a week later. I still hear, sometimes, a soft dragging noise in my ears at night. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if I want to find out. I used to work as a night security guard in a small private hospital. Not a big, busy one. This place mostly handled long-term patients and people recovering from surgery. Nights were usually silent. Too silent. My job was simple. Walk the halls every hour, check the side doors, sign a clipboard, done. One night, around 3 a.m., I was doing my round on the second floor when I heard someone whispering. At first I thought it was a nurse, but the tone was weird, shaky, urgent, like someone trying to get attention without being heard by anyone else. I followed it down the hallway until I reached room 214. The door was halfway open, lights off inside. The whispering stopped immediately. I knocked softly. No answer. I pushed the door open with my flashlight. The bed was empty. Sheets perfectly folded. No one. But the whispering started again, behind me this time. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I stood there, heart pounding, telling myself I was tired, imagining things. I stepped inside the room to check the bathroom. That's when I saw it. The whiteboard on the wall, the one where nurses write the patient's name and notes, had fresh handwriting on it. 3 words, written messy and uneven, like someone scribbling fast. Don't let him in. I backed out of the room, keeping my eyes on that board. When I got out into the hallway, all the doors on that floor, every single one, were slightly open. They had been closed during my first check. I didn't finish my round. I went straight to the monitors. Every hallway camera was fine, except the one facing room 214. That screen was completely black. The weirdest part? The patient assigned to room 214 had died 2 days earlier. My boss told me the power outage on that one camera was probably just a glitch. I didn't argue. I just handed him my badge and quit right there. I used to work early morning shifts at a small-town bakery. I'd get in at around 3:30 a.m., when it was still pitch black outside. The building was old, creaky floors, humming freezers, that constant smell of yeast and burnt sugar stuck in the walls. Usually, I was alone for the first hour. My boss showed up around 4:45. One morning, I walked in and immediately felt something was off. The air was wrong. Too warm, like someone had been in there for hours with the ovens running, but everything was cold and powered off. I turned the lights on and saw flower footprints across the back room. Not shoe prints, bare footprints. Long, narrow, and spaced like someone had been walking slowly, deliberately. I knew I hadn't made them. The alarms had been armed all night. No windows or doors showed signs of being forced. But there they were, flower footsteps leading from the prep station into the freezer. Not out of it. Into it. I thought maybe my boss came in during the night and forgot to tell me, so I called him immediately. He answered half asleep. "Why are you calling at 3:40 in the morning?" I told him what I saw. He told me not to go near the freezer and that he'd be there in 20 minutes. Before he hung up, I heard him mutter, "Not again." That "not again" bothered me. I waited in the front, trying not to look at the footprints, which seemed, maybe it was my imagination, slightly smudged now, like they'd been disturbed. My boss arrived. He didn't say a word to me. He put gloves on, grabbed a crowbar, and walked to the freezer. I stood far back. He opened it slowly. The light flickered on. Nothing. Absolutely nothing inside. But here's the part that still bothers me. As he was checking the corners of the freezer, he said under his breath, very quietly, like he forgot I was standing behind him, "They always go back in when they hear the door open." I pretended I didn't hear that. He told me to start prepping dough like normal and that he'd clean up the footprints. I quit a week later, and to this day I still wonder what he meant by they, and why the footprints went in but never came out. I worked the night shift at a small call center. Most nights were boring, just answering customer calls and logging tickets. The building was old, with one main stairwell and a bunch of empty offices upstairs. Security cameras, but only in the lobby. One night, around 2 a.m., I was finishing up some paperwork when I heard typing from the office across the hall. Strange, because everyone else had left hours ago. I peeked in. The office was empty. The computer screen was on, though flickering in the dark. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe someone had forgotten to log off. I walked away, but the typing continued. Then came the whisper, "Help me." I froze. It was soft, almost desperate, coming from inside the empty office. I backed away slowly, convinced I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. But the typing stopped. And then footsteps. Not from the hall, from inside the office. Slowly pacing. Heavy, deliberate. I wanted to call security, but my phone wouldn't get a signal. I tried to stay calm and told myself it was probably just an old building settling or a prank from one of the day shift guys. Then the office door, which had been closed, creaked open on its own. I bolted. I ran down the hall, tripped over a chair, didn't care. I reached the lobby, slammed the exit door behind me, and stayed outside until sunrise. When the morning shift came in, I told them what happened. They looked at me strangely and said, "No one has been in that office for weeks. Ever since the guy who worked there disappeared." I quit that day. I never found out what happened to him. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone at home, I swear I hear faint typing. I worked in an old, almost abandoned office building as a janitor. The place was mostly empty. A few small companies rented space, but by 8 p.m., it was just me and the security guard. One night, I was cleaning the 6th floor. The lights flickered as usual, but then I noticed something odd. Every door on that floor was slightly open. That didn't make sense. I had locked them all earlier. I shrugged it off and continued, vacuuming down the hall. Then I heard it, soft, dragging footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. Not like a person walking, like someone limping. I turned, empty hallway. Just my reflection in the glass doors. I kept moving, trying not to panic. The footsteps kept pace with me. I walked faster. They sped up too. Then, I heard whispering. Low, hissing, almost incoherent. Don't stay, leave. I ran to the stairwell. The sound followed me all the way down. I flung open the front door, ran out into the empty parking lot, and didn't stop until I reached my car. The next day, when I went back to clean, the 6th floor was completely empty. No doors were open. No footprints. Nothing. When I asked the building manager about it, he just said, "That floor's been empty for years. No one's supposed to be up there at night." I quit that week. Even now, I get chills thinking about those footsteps keeping pace with mine, whispering. I worked at a small, 24-hour grocery store. Night shifts were usually quiet, except for the occasional customer who came in too late. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I was restocking shelves in aisle 7. I thought I saw someone out of the corner of my eye, a man standing near the frozen foods, completely still. When I looked directly, he was gone. I shrugged it off. Maybe a reflection or my imagination. But then I heard a soft hum, like someone singing under their breath. Slow, tuneless, low. I started walking toward the security cameras to check if anyone was in the store. The hum followed me, but louder now, closer, like someone was behind the shelves, moving. I rounded the corner and saw him, a man in a dark hoodie, standing in the middle of the aisle. Only, his face was pale white, almost gray. His eyes were completely black, and he wasn't moving, just staring at me. I froze. Before I could react, he whispered, "Why are you here alone?" I bolted to the front doors. When I got outside, he was gone. I called the manager the next day and showed the security footage. Nothing. The cameras didn't capture anyone in aisle 7 that night. I quit a week later. Even now, sometimes when I'm walking through grocery stores at night, I feel like someone is watching me, standing still, just staring, waiting. I used to work at a small office doing data entry. Boring job, quiet floor, only a handful of employees. The weird thing about our building was the basement, a huge, empty storage area that no one used anymore. The lights down there hummed loudly, and sometimes flickered even when they were brand new. One morning, my manager asked me to go downstairs and bring up an old filing box. I hated the basement, but I needed the job, so I went. When I opened the basement door, the lights were already on. That was strange. They were motion activated, and I hadn't stepped in yet. I went down slowly. The storage area was massive, rows and rows of shelves disappearing into the dim buzzing lights. As I walked, I heard papers shuffling somewhere deeper in the room. I froze and listened. Shoo-shoo-shoo, like someone flipping through a thick stack of documents. I called out, "Hello? Anyone down here?" No answer. I kept walking. I found the box I needed and started heading back. As I reached the stairs, I heard someone walking behind me. Light, quick footsteps. I turned. Nothing. I went upstairs fast, shut the door behind me, and tried to shake it off. But here's the part that really bothered me. Later that afternoon, my manager called me into his office. He looked confused, almost pale. He said, "Where did you find the box?" "In the basement," I said. "Row 3, like you told me." He stared at me for a moment, then said quietly, "I didn't ask you to go to the basement today. I haven't been in my office since this morning." I thought he was messing with me, until he showed me his outgoing calls and messages. There wasn't a single one sent to me all day. I checked my phone. The message asking me to get the box wasn't there anymore. I tried to convince myself I just imagined it, until my coworker casually asked me later, "Hey, why were you down in the basement earlier? I saw the lights turning on." I never went down there again. And no one has an explanation for who told me to, or how they knew exactly which box to ask for. I used to work at a small local museum, the kind that isn't busy, even on weekends. Mostly I sat at the front desk, answered questions, and made sure no one touched the old exhibits. The creepiest part of the building was the East Wing. It used to be a children's hospital back in the early 1900s, and the museum only restored half of it. The other half was sealed off behind a heavy fire door with a sign that said staff only, do not enter. I'd hear noises behind that door sometimes. Tiny ones, soft tapping, or a giggle that sounded like it came from the far end of the shuttered hallway. I told myself it was pipes, ventilation, echoes, anything except what it sounded like. One late afternoon, when we were closing up, I realized I couldn't find the keys to the display cases. They weren't on the hook, not in the drawer, nowhere. I retraced my steps through the museum, getting more annoyed by the minute. Then I heard it. A metallic clink from the East Wing. I shouldn't have gone there. I knew that. But the fire door was cracked open about an inch, just enough for a sliver of darkness to spill out. Something was hanging from the doorknob. The keys. My keys. I leaned forward and took them, trying not to look into the gap. But curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open maybe 6 inches more. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by a faint emergency light at the far end. Dust everywhere. Old wheelchairs. Broken gurneys. It looked like no one had walked through it in decades. But there were fresh footprints in the dust. Small footprints. Bare ones. Leading away from the door, then looping back toward it, like someone had been pacing. Waiting. I slammed the door shut and locked it, heart pounding. The next morning I told the head custodian about what I saw. He went pale and said quietly, "That door doesn't open. The lock's been jammed for years. We don't even have the key anymore." I showed him the keys I had found, my own set. The little red tag on the keyring that said East Wing wasn't one we even used at the museum. He had never seen it before. I quit the following week. I still don't know who, or what, returned my keys. Or why it needed me to open the door. I used to work at a small accounting firm. The building wasn't haunted or old or anything dramatic, just a plain, boring 2-story office in a business park. The only odd thing was the storage room on the second floor. No windows, one flickering light, boxes stacked to the ceiling. I always hated going in there because the air felt too still. One night, I stayed late to finish quarterly reports. Everyone else had left hours earlier. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy ones, slow, like someone pacing back and forth. I assumed the cleaning crew had shown up early, so I went up to tell them I was still working. But the hallway was dark. Completely. And the storage room door, the one that was always closed, was halfway open. I felt this pressure in my chest, like someone was standing just out of sight. Still, I called out, "Hello? Is someone up here?" No answer. I reached for the light switch. The moment the lights flickered on, the footsteps stopped. And then I saw it, a file box sitting in the middle of the hallway. Not just sitting, placed. Deliberately. Like someone wanted me to notice it. I approached slowly. The lid was off. Inside were dozens of printed photographs, black and white, grainy, low angle, like someone had taken them from the floor or from behind furniture. Each picture was of the office, but empty. Desks. Hallways. The break room. Meeting spaces. Empty chairs. All except the last one. The last photo was of my desk. My chair. My keyboard. My half-finished report. It had been taken that night. Same papers. Same pen placement. Same coffee mug. But the picture was from the perspective of someone standing directly behind me. Only I hadn't heard anyone. I hadn't seen anyone. I was completely alone. I felt the air go colder. And from the storage room behind me, I heard someone exhale, long and deliberate. I didn't look back. I walked straight down the hall, down the stairs, grabbed my keys, and left everything, including my bag, on my desk. The next morning, when my boss and I checked the hallway, the box was gone. But the storage room door was wide open, and the light inside was off. I quit the next day. I still can't shake the feeling that whoever stood behind me that night had been standing there many nights before. I used to work as a night auditor at a small hotel off the highway. It wasn't haunted, it wasn't old, just one of those quiet, forgettable buildings where nothing interesting ever happens. That changed during a winter storm. Around 2 a.m., when the snow was coming down hard, the front door slid open. A guest walked in, tall, soaked, wearing a heavy coat and gloves. He didn't speak at first, just stood there dripping onto the lobby floor. I said, "Rough night out there, huh?" He tilted his head like he didn't understand the words. Then he said, "Room." Just that. No tone. Like he was practicing the word. I asked for his ID or credit card. He didn't respond. He just stared at the wall behind me, like he was looking at something over my shoulder. I was about to call security when he slowly reached into his pocket and placed a room key on the counter. One of ours. A real key card. Room 212. That room wasn't rented out. We kept it empty because the heating unit was broken. The key cards were all in the back office, and I had all of them accounted for earlier that night. I said, "Sir, where did you get this?" He blinked slowly. Then he said, "Room." Cold. The way he said cold made my skin crawl. I went to the computer to check if maybe a housekeeper accidentally typed an extra rental earlier, but before I could, he turned and walked down the hallway toward the elevators. He moved strangely, stiff, dragging almost, like his clothes were heavier than they should have been. I picked up the phone to call for help. As the line rang, the elevator dinged, and I heard it going up. When I got through to security, I said, "A man just took the elevator to the second floor. He has a key to 212. There was a long pause. Then the guard said, "That room doesn't exist anymore." I thought he meant it was under renovation or something. But he sounded scared. He said, "We converted 212 into a storage room last year. No bed. No furniture. No heat. The door doesn't even have a handle from the outside." My stomach dropped. I ran to the elevator and took it up. The hallway was freezing, like someone had left a window open. The air tasted like metal. And the door to 212, the one that wasn't supposed to open, was cracked open about 2 inches. A faint cold light flickered inside. I called the guard, but before he could get to me, the door slowly swung shut. I didn't touch it. I didn't look inside. The next morning, when maintenance checked the room, it was locked from the inside. No footprints. No melted snow. No sign anyone had entered. And the keycard the man gave me? It didn't work in any lock in the entire building. It didn't even register as one of ours when scanned. Just a blank, dead piece of plastic. I don't know what I saw that night. But every winter, during the first heavy snowfall, the elevator stops on the second floor around 2 a.m. And the door to the old 212 is always cracked open just a little bit. I used to work in the records department of a large government building. My job was basically glorified filing, floor after floor of old documents, archives, storage rooms nobody visited unless they had to. The 9th floor was the worst. It wasn't abandoned, but it always felt like it should be. The lights buzzed louder there. The air felt heavier. And for some reason, The temperature was always just a little colder than every other floor. One afternoon, my supervisor asked me to find a box of old personnel files from 1998. He gave me the catalog number and said, "It'll be on 9." I tried not to react. When I got to the 9th floor, the hallway was empty and too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing echo. I found the storage room with the right section and stepped inside. 3 things immediately felt wrong. First, the overhead lights flickered once, then went dead. Second, something metallic clattered deeper in the rows of shelves. Third, I clearly heard someone whisper my name. Not loud, not even urgent, just familiar. Like someone who'd known me for a long time. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight. The beam wasn't strong, but enough to navigate. I followed the aisle numbers until I reached the row with the right box. The lid was off. Not thrown, not fallen, placed neatly beside it. Inside the box wasn't paperwork. It was photos, dozens of them, all recent, of me. Walking into the building, eating lunch, sitting at my desk, leaving for the night. And some were taken inside my apartment, shots of my kitchen, my hallway, my bedroom door. All from low angles, like the camera was on the floor. I stumbled back and dropped a few photos. Behind me, something moved between the shelves. The shuffling of shoes. Then slow breathing, close, too close, like someone was standing just behind the row divider. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just ran. I didn't stop until I reached the stairwell. As I pulled the door open, I heard someone whisper behind me again, this time right at my ear. "Don't take your eyes off me next time." I slammed the door and bolted down the stairs 4 floors before I stopped. I went straight to my supervisor's office, shaking, holding the photos I'd grabbed by accident. He looked at the top one, a picture of me sleeping, and his face went pale. He said, quietly, "We shut down the 9th floor cameras years ago. No one should have access up there except me." Then he handed the photo back and said, "Leave. Go home. Don't come back tomorrow." I didn't argue. I quit that same night. And ever since, sometimes I wake up to the feeling that someone was standing in my doorway and stepped away just a second too late. I used to work the opening shift at a small cafe. I had to be there at 4:45 a.m. to prep pastries, start the espresso machines, and get everything ready before the morning rush. For months, I thought I was the first person in the building every day. Lights off, doors locked, total silence. But then I started noticing small things out of place when I arrived. A stool left slightly angled, a cabinet door cracked open, a pastry tray pulled out an inch. Little things you'd assume you just forgot to close the day before. I didn't think much about it. Then one morning, I walked in and found one of the barista aprons hanging on the counter instead of on the hook. Not folded, draped, like someone had taken it off and left it there casually. I brushed it off, figuring the closer must have been tired. The next morning, 2 chairs were pulled away from the tables, facing the back door. Like someone had been sitting there, watching it. I told myself not to overthink it. Then came the day I'll never forget. I unlocked the cafe, stepped inside, and immediately felt wrong. The air was warm, too warm. Like someone had been in there for hours. I turned on the lights. Every chair in the entire cafe, all 14 of them, was pulled out and turned to face the far corner of the room. All angled the same way. All perfectly spaced. Like an audience waiting for something to start. The far corner wall was empty brick. Nothing there. I stood frozen for a good minute. Then my eyes caught something on the counter, a single paper cup upside down. A note underneath it. I pulled the cup away. On the note, in small, neat handwriting, was just one sentence. "I like when you come in alone." I felt a rush of cold at the back of my neck, like someone was right behind me. I didn't turn around. I just walked backward to the door, keeping my eyes on that corner where the chairs pointed. Then I bolted. When the manager arrived, the chairs were all normal again. Note gone. Cup gone. No signs anyone had been inside. Cameras? Of course they were malfunctioning that night. Perfect timing. I quit the same day. But the part that still keeps me up sometimes? Several times now, when I'm heading to work at a different job early in the morning, I feel like someone is pacing their footsteps behind mine, always stopping when I stop, always just out of sight. And I swear, once, I heard a whisper behind me. Early mornings are my favorite. I used to work the late shift alone in a tiny municipal records office. Most of the job was digitizing old paperwork, death certificates, birth logs, police reports from the 70s, mind-numbing but peaceful. The building itself was ancient, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and endless rows of metal filing cabinets that hummed when the heater kicked on. One night, around 1 a.m., I heard a drawer slam somewhere in the back. It was loud, much louder than the usual creaks of the old building. I assumed it was the heater settling again, but then I heard it slide open immediately after. A slow metal scrape. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound down the corridor. The beam kept shaking because I knew nobody else was supposed to be there. About halfway down the aisle, I saw an open filing drawer. Just one. Everything else was perfectly closed. Inside was a single blue folder sticking out slightly farther than the others. I had never seen a blue folder before. Everything in the archive was manila. When I reached for it, the drawer slammed shut so hard the metal rattled. I jumped back and dropped my flashlight, which rolled under a shelf. As I bent down to grab it, I saw a movement, bare feet stepping out of the next aisle over. I stood up slowly. Nobody was there. But the blue folder was on the floor now, lying open. It wasn't full of forms or documents. It held a single Polaroid. A photo of the records room I was standing in, taken from behind me. And in the picture, just over my shoulder, was a pale figure leaning out from the aisle, looking directly at me. I spun around, shining my light down every row, every gap. Nothing. I turned back to the photo. The figure was closer now. The Polaroid had changed. Every muscle in my body locked up. I dropped the photo and ran straight out of the building, not even bothering to lock the door. When I returned the next day with my supervisor, the blue folder was gone. No record of it. No Polaroid. The drawer was shut tight. Officially, I reported it as faulty ventilation causing noise. Unofficially, I've never worked a late shift again. I used to work the overnight shift at a corporate office building. The offices were mostly empty, the lights dimmed, and only the cleaning staff and security were around after hours. My job was simple: restock supplies, empty trash, and make sure the floors were clean. One night, I was in a hallway near the elevators when I heard the faint sound of someone sweeping. At first, I thought it was the night janitor, but then I remembered. He didn't start work for another 30 minutes. I turned the corner. The hallway was empty. The broom was leaning against the wall, perfectly still. Shrugging it off, I continued down the hall. The sweeping sound followed. Soft, deliberate, echoing through the empty floors. I stopped. It stopped. I walked again. The sound returned, closer this time. And then a whisper. "Don't leave." I froze. There was nobody there. The doors were locked. Security cameras covered every hallway. I ran to the lobby. The lights flickered. Behind the front desk, a shadow moved, but no one was at the desk. The next morning, the night janitor told me the hallway I had been in was closed for maintenance. He had been cleaning the first floor all night, and no one had entered that section. I never worked alone on that floor again. I used to work the night shift at a small insurance office. Around 11 p.m., most of the building was dark and empty. My office was at the far end of a long hallway, with only one exit and a window that looked out into the parking lot. One night, I finished filing and went to grab some coffee. When I returned, my office door, which I always locked when I left, was wide open. At first, I thought I'd forgotten to lock it. But then I noticed the papers on my desk were rearranged. Not messy, just different. Precise. Almost deliberate. I stepped in and called out. No response. The air felt colder than the rest of the building. I bent down to pick up a folder when I heard a faint tapping behind me, like fingernails on the glass window. I spun around. Nothing. Then I heard it again, louder, soft breathing. Close. I ran to the hallway. The door slammed shut behind me on its own. I tried to open it. Locked. The next morning, the manager found the door unlocked and my office exactly as I'd left it. Papers untouched, no footprints, no sign anyone had been there. I quit that week. Even now, I avoid offices with long, empty hallways after dark. I worked the night shift at a call center. Around 2 a.m., the office was silent except for the hum of computers. I was alone at my desk, finishing up some paperwork. Then my phone rang. Not the main line, but my extension. I answered cautiously. There was nothing at first, just heavy breathing. Then a voice, faint and distorted. I'm still here. I froze. I told myself it was a prank or a crossed line from another extension. I hung up and went to check the office. Every desk was empty. Every computer locked down. The security cameras showed no one in the building except me. The phone rang again. Same extension, same voice. Don't leave. I grabbed my bag and ran. The doors were locked from the inside. I had to wait outside until morning for someone to let me in to turn off the alarm. The next day, IT checked the system. There had been no calls made from or to my extension that night. No explanation. I worked late nights in an office that was usually empty after 8 p.m. One night, around 11:30, I heard the faint sound of someone walking in the hallway outside my office. Slow, steady footsteps. I looked up from my desk. No one. I assumed it was another employee who had stayed late and went back to their office. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I called out, "Hello." No answer. I slowly got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. But there, at the far end of the hall, the light in the stairwell flickered on, even though it was supposed to be motion activated and no one had passed it. I watched for a few minutes. Nothing moved. I went back to my desk and tried to ignore it. A few minutes later, my computer screen flickered, then went black. A message appeared, typed in slowly across the empty Word document. You shouldn't be here alone. I bolted from the office. The stairwell light went off as I ran past. The next morning, my coworkers said no one had been in the building after 8 p.m. No one knows how that message appeared on my computer. I used to work the night shift at a large retail store. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. Around 1 a.m., I went to restock supplies in the back when I noticed the cleaning closet door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it earlier. I peeked inside. The mop and broom were in their usual place, nothing unusual. I shrugged it off and kept walking. Then I heard it, a low, scraping noise from the back of the closet, like something metal being dragged across the floor. I froze. The noise stopped. I called out, but there was no answer. I slowly opened the closet again. Empty. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. I turned to leave, and the door slammed shut behind me. Locked. I rattled the handle. Nothing. After what felt like minutes, it finally opened on its own. I bolted. The next day, the store manager checked the security cameras. The cleaning closet hadn't been opened at all that night. Nothing explains it. I worked alone on the night shift at a small office building. Around midnight, the phone on my desk rang. I answered, but there was only static. Then a faint voice came through. "Why are you still here?" I froze. I knew the building was empty. No employees, no visitors, no maintenance scheduled. I hung up and tried to focus on my work. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number, same static, same voice. "Don't leave." I checked the security cameras. Every hallway was empty. Every office was dark. When I turned back to my desk, a chair I hadn't moved was now pulled out, as if someone had been sitting in it behind me. I left immediately. The next morning, IT confirmed that no calls had been made or received on that extension. No one has an explanation. I worked the night shift at a small warehouse. Around 2 a.m., I went to the break room to grab some coffee. The lights flickered as usual, but I thought nothing of it. As I poured my coffee, I noticed a shadow in the corner of the room. At first, I assumed it was a trick of the light, but then it moved, slowly, deliberately, across the wall, staying just out of reach of the light. I froze. The shadow didn't have a body, just a dark shape, crouched and shifting, like it was watching me. I took a step back, and it retreated slightly, then stayed still. I slowly reached for my phone to call security. By the time I looked back, the shadow was gone. The next morning, the security footage showed nothing unusual. No movement in the break room, no one entering or leaving. But every time I walked past that corner during my shift, I felt like something was waiting there, just out of sight. I used to work in a small publishing company that stored old manuscripts in a basement archive. Only one stairwell led down there, and the motion-activated light at the bottom was notorious for being a little slow to turn on. One night, I had to stay late to finish a layout. Around midnight, I realized I needed one of the older drafts stored downstairs. I grabbed the key, unlocked the stairwell door, and started walking down. Halfway down the steps, the basement light clicked on. That was strange. The sensor never turned on until you were basically standing under it. But I told myself it was finally fixed and kept going. When I reached the bottom, the light turned off again. Total darkness. I froze. The sensor had never done that before. I waved my arms. Nothing. I took a small step back, and the light clicked on instantly. That's when I saw it. A figure was standing behind one of the shelves, just a silhouette, motionless. At first I thought it was a mannequin, but we didn't keep anything like that down there. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, facing me, half hidden by boxes. I backed up the stairs slowly. As soon as I stepped onto the third step, the light shut off again. I didn't wait for it to turn back on. I ran up the stairs, slammed the door, and didn't go back for the manuscript. The next morning, I asked my manager if anyone had been doing inventory in the basement. "No one's been down there for weeks," he said. "The sensor's still broken. Light doesn't turn on at all." I didn't argue. I just stopped working late shifts. I worked the night shift at a large, mostly empty office building. Around 1 a.m., I was walking down a long hallway when I saw the cleaning cart at the end of the hall. It wasn't there when I started my shift. I assumed one of the janitors had already started early. I called out, but no one answered. As I approached, the cart slowly started moving toward me, even though the wheels were locked. I froze. The cart stopped when I stopped. I tried to walk past it, but it moved again, always keeping pace with me. The lights above flickered as I hurried down the hallway. When I finally reached the stairwell, the cart stopped completely and didn't move when I looked back. The next morning, the janitor told me the cart had been in storage all night. No one had been in that hallway at all. I quit the night shift after that. I worked late one night in an office building, finishing up reports. Around 11:30 p.m., I walked past the break room and noticed the copier was running, even though I hadn't touched it. Curious, I walked over. The paper was feeding through, printing page after page. When I picked one up, it was blank. I checked the settings, nothing had been scheduled. Then I heard the soft sound of pages flipping behind me. I turned around, no one there. I looked back at the copier. A single sheet had printed, this time with a message in neat, typed letters. You shouldn't be here alone. I left immediately. The next morning, no one had touched the copier. No settings had been changed. The pages? They had disappeared. I worked the night shift at a small help desk for a utility company. Around 2 a.m., the phone rang. I answered, but there was only silence. Then a low voice whispered, "I see you." I froze. I knew the office was empty. No coworkers, no visitors. I hung up and went to check the security cameras. Every monitor showed empty desks and empty hallways. The phone rang again. Same extension, same whisper. "Don't move." I stayed frozen, staring at the monitors. When I finally got the courage to pick up the receiver, it was dead. No one ever explained it. The cameras showed nothing, the phone log showed nothing. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear faint whispers over the line, even when no one is there. I used to work as a night security officer at an old office building. It wasn't a large building, but it was old, wooden floors that creaked, narrow hallways, and fluorescent lights that flickered at random. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and monitor the security cameras. Most nights were boring. Too boring. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I was walking the second floor when I noticed one of the office doors, normally locked, was slightly ajar. That was strange. I had checked all the doors when I started my shift. I called out, "Hello." Nothing. I approached slowly, hand on my flashlight. The door was dark inside. I could just make out rows of desks and chairs. All empty. I stepped in. The air was colder than the rest of the floor. My flashlight flickered. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping coming from the far corner of the room. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone was wrapping their fingers on a desk. I froze. The security cameras should have shown movement. I pulled out my radio and asked the control room if anyone had entered the building. They said no one had come in after the doors were locked at 11 p.m. I tried to convince myself it was a branch knocking against the window or the pipes settling. I moved toward the sound, step by step. The tapping stopped. I shined the flashlight around the corner. Nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed something else. A chair had been pulled out. Not just any chair, it was my chair. The one I used at the front desk. I backed out of the office and shut the door. I checked the camera feed from the lobby. The door was closed. No one entered or exited. I continued my patrol, but now I was nervous. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the hallways. I checked all the emergency exits, locked. Windows, locked. No one else should be in the building. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, footsteps behind me. Heavy, dragging footsteps. I spun around. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It followed me, floor to floor, through the hallways. I ran to the stairwell. The steps creaked beneath me, but the dragging sound was slower, deliberate, behind me. I reached the ground floor and bolted to the lobby. The front doors were locked, and the alarm was armed. I radioed the control room again. They told me everything looked normal on their end. When I finally left the building at the end of my shift, the parking lot was empty. Silent. Too silent. The next day, maintenance told me that the second-floor office I had entered had been empty for months. No one worked there, and the lights weren't even connected to the main circuit anymore. They were supposed to be dead. I quit that job the following week. Years later, I still have trouble walking alone in empty buildings. Sometimes, when I'm alone in a hallway at night, I swear I hear that same dragging step behind me. Slow. Deliberate. Waiting. No one will ever know what was in that office that night. I worked the night shift at a large, mostly empty warehouse. My job was simple: check the inventory, monitor the cameras, and make rounds every hour. Most nights were quiet, so quiet you could hear the walls settling, the floors creaking, even the hum of the fluorescent lights. One night, around 12:45 a.m., I noticed something odd on the camera feed. A storage room on the far side of the warehouse, the one that had been locked for months, was slightly ajar. I thought it was a mistake, maybe maintenance had left it unlocked, so I went to check. The hallway was dark and silent. My footsteps echoed unnaturally as I walked toward the room. When I reached it, the door was open just enough to slip a hand in. I called out, "Hello." Nothing. The air smelled off, musty, like mold, but sharper. I pushed the door wider with my flashlight. Inside, the room was empty. Boxes were stacked neatly, nothing disturbed. But then I saw it, a single box on the floor, pulled away from the others. The label had been scratched off. As I stepped closer, I heard a faint scraping behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I tried to laugh it off as my imagination. I bent down to inspect the box. Inside, there were old employee records, but all the names were scratched out except one. My name. I jumped back, my flashlight flickering. Then the door slammed shut. Hard. I ran to it, but it wouldn't budge. The handle wouldn't turn. I pounded on it, shouted for help, my voice echoing back at me. After what felt like forever, the door slowly creaked open. I bolted out, never looking back. The next day, maintenance checked the room. They said it had been sealed for over 6 months. No one had a key. The box, it was gone. I quit the warehouse the following week. But sometimes, when I pass empty hallways late at night, I swear I can still hear the scraping of someone, or something, following me, waiting for me to enter a room I shouldn't. I worked the late shift at a large, corporate office building. Most nights, I was the only one in the building besides the cleaning staff. My job was to monitor security cameras, do rounds, and make sure nothing suspicious happened. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking the 3rd floor, checking offices. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the HVAC system. That's when I noticed a door at the far end of the hall, the janitor's closet, was slightly open. I knew for a fact it should have been locked. The janitor didn't start work until 3 a.m. I called out, but no one answered. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight inside. The closet looked normal, shelves of cleaning supplies, mops, and buckets. Nothing unusual. Then I heard it, a low scraping sound, like metal being dragged across the floor. I froze. The sound stopped when I stopped. I slowly approached the door again. As soon as I peeked inside, I saw it, A figure crouched in the corner, pale and unmoving. Its head was slightly tilted, watching me. I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight. The figure didn't move, but I could hear breathing, soft, deliberate. My heart raced. I tried to reach for my radio, but it was too far. When I finally got my radio and called the security office, the feed from the cameras showed nothing. No one was in the closet. No movement in the hallway. Everything normal. Terrified, I ran to the stairwell and stayed there until the janitor arrived at 3 a.m. He went to the closet, opened it, and found nothing. No figure. No footprints. Not even my flashlight. I quit that night. Even now, years later, I get chills when I walk past closets, storage rooms, or narrow hallways. Sometimes, in my dreams, I hear the scraping again, slow and deliberate, always behind me. I used to work the night shift at a small marketing firm. Most nights were quiet. The office building was old, with long hallways and dark corners. Only a handful of security cameras covered the main floor, and the upper offices were completely unmonitored. One night, I was finishing up reports at my desk around 1:30 a.m. I noticed the lights in the office at the far end of the hallway flickering. That wasn't unusual. Some bulbs were old, but then I saw movement. A shadow crossed the office window. I stood up and walked down the hall, thinking maybe someone had forgotten something. But when I reached the office, it was completely empty. Chair pushed in, computer off, no sign anyone had been there. I returned to my desk, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. Then, I heard it, faint typing. Slow, deliberate, coming from the same office. I froze. I called out, "Hello." Silence. I grabbed my flashlight and walked back. The office door was slightly open now, even though I was sure I had checked it before. I peeked inside. The keyboard was typing on its own. Letters appearing on the screen. "Don't turn around." I stumbled backward. The office was empty. My heart raced. I couldn't explain it. I ran to the stairwell, trying to shake it off as a prank or a technical glitch. But the typing continued, faint, echoing down the hallway. I left the building and didn't return that night. The next day, my coworkers told me no one had been in the office at all. The security cameras confirmed it. To this day, I can't explain the typing, the shadow, or the message. I worked the night shift at a mid-sized office building. Most nights were uneventful, except for the usual hum of the ventilation system and the flickering of old fluorescent lights. My job was simple: monitor security cameras, make rounds, and make sure the building was secure. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I was taking the elevator to the 5th floor to check on an office I hadn't visited yet. When I pressed the button, the elevator doors closed and started moving up, but halfway, it stopped. The lights flickered, and the display panel went blank. I pressed the emergency button. No response. The elevator was completely silent except for the faint hum of the motor. Then I noticed movement through the small elevator window. A shadow flitted past on the floor above me. I pressed the button for another floor. The elevator jolted slightly, then stopped again. I checked the cameras on the security feed. The elevator doors were closed on every floor. No one was inside except me. Suddenly, the elevator lights went out completely. Total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, which was in my pocket. When I turned it on, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the elevator, tall, pale, completely still, staring at me. I froze. The figure didn't move. I pressed all the buttons, shook the doors, screamed even, but nothing worked. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished. The elevator lurched, lights flickered back on, and the doors opened on the 5th floor. No one was there. No footprints. No signs anyone had been inside. I finished my rounds quickly and didn't use the elevator alone again. The next morning, the building manager checked the elevator logs. The elevator hadn't stopped at any floor that night except where I had called it, and the doors hadn't opened at any other floor. I quit a week later. To this day, I avoid elevators in empty buildings at night. I worked the night shift at a small tech company. Most nights were boring, monitoring servers, checking security cameras, and making sure no one entered the building. The server room was at the far end of the office, a small, windowless space filled with racks of humming machines. One night, around 1:15 a.m., I noticed the temperature in the server room was unusually low. I checked the sensors, nothing unusual, but when I walked closer, I saw the door was slightly open. I was sure I had locked it when I finished my last check. I stepped inside. The room was cold, too cold, but the servers were running normally. Then I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye, a shadow shifting between the racks. I spun around. Nothing. I reached for my radio to call the security office, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadow had returned. This time, I could make out a figure, tall, thin, pale, and it wasn't behind the racks anymore. It was standing silently, just behind me. I didn't turn. My instinct screamed at me to leave, so I backed out slowly. The figure followed, but as soon as I reached the door, it vanished. I ran to the lobby and called the building manager. When he arrived, he inspected the server room. The door was locked from the inside. No footprints. No signs of anyone being there. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I pass a server room or an empty tech workspace at night, I feel like something is watching, silently waiting in the racks, just out of sight. I worked the night shift at a small law firm. Most of the office was on the ground floor, but the archives and some storage rooms were in the basement. The stairwell leading down was narrow, dimly lit, and the air was always slightly damp. One night, around 2 a.m., I had to retrieve a file from the basement. I unlocked the stairwell door and descended slowly, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The basement was quiet except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. As I walked past the rows of filing cabinets, I noticed one of the office doors at the far end was open. That was impossible. The door was always locked. I had checked it earlier. I approached cautiously. The office was dark, empty, and cold, colder than the rest of the basement. My flashlight flickered for a moment, and I thought I saw a figure in the corner, but when I blinked, it was gone. I reached for the file I needed and heard a faint whisper behind me. "Why are you down here alone?" I spun around. Nothing. The air felt heavier, like someone was standing right behind me, just out of reach. I grabbed the file and hurried back to the stairs. When I reached the ground floor, I locked the stairwell door behind me. Later, the building manager told me that no one had been in the basement all night. Security cameras confirmed it. Even now, years later, I still avoid basements. Sometimes I dream of that office, and I can hear whispers just beyond the door, asking me the same question. "Why are you down here alone?" I worked the night shift at a large law firm. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. The building was old, with long hallways, high ceilings, and offices stacked on multiple floors. My job was simple: monitor the security cameras, do rounds, and make sure everything stayed locked and secure. One night, around 1:45 a.m., I was walking the 5th floor when I noticed something strange on the security monitors. In one of the office corridors, a door that should have been locked was slightly ajar. I walked toward it. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. When I reached the door, it was fully open. The office inside was empty, No lights, no chairs moved, nothing disturbed. I shined my flashlight inside and froze. On the far side of the office, in the corner, I saw a figure crouched on the floor. Pale, thin, and completely still. Its head slowly turned toward me, but it didn't move from its spot. I called out, "Hello." Nothing. The figure remained there, motionless. My flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, the figure had vanished. I checked the office thoroughly. No windows open, no hiding spots, nothing at all. I went back to the security office to check the cameras. On the monitor, the office had been empty the entire night. No one entered or left. I finished my rounds quickly, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. Every shadow seemed alive. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deliberate. I quit the next week. Even now, I get chills when walking down empty office hallways at night, imagining that figure crouched in the corner, still watching, still waiting. I worked the night shift at a small corporate office building. Most nights were quiet, the only sounds coming from the old ventilation system and the hum of computers left running in empty offices. My job was to patrol the floors and ensure everything was secure. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I noticed that a light on the third floor had turned on. That floor had been empty for months due to renovations, and all the switches were supposed to be disconnected. I took the stairs up, every step echoing down the empty stairwell. As I approached the hallway, the light flickered. The office doors were all closed, except one at the far end. The door was slightly ajar, though I had checked it earlier in the evening. I walked closer. The air was colder here, and I could hear a faint humming, like machinery, but there was nothing that should have been running. I pushed the door open fully. The office was empty. Chairs tucked in, computers off, papers stacked neatly. Then I saw movement, a shadow at the corner of the room, stretching along the wall. I froze. It wasn't a person, just a dark silhouette, amorphous, shifting slightly, as if it was aware I was there. I stepped back, and the shadow stretched toward me. I turned and ran down the hallway, heart pounding. Behind me, the faint sound of footsteps echoed, but the security cameras later confirmed that no one else was on the floor. I called the building manager the next morning. He checked the floor and said nothing had been touched. The light switch for that office was still disconnected, and no one had access to that floor. I quit shortly after. Even now, whenever I walk past an empty office at night, I feel a subtle pressure, like someone, or something, is watching from the corner, waiting for me to look. I worked the night shift at a small municipal office. The building was mostly empty after 8 p.m., with only security and cleaning staff moving around. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I found a key on the floor of the lobby. It was small, unmarked, and I didn't recognize it. I checked my key ring. None of the building's locks matched it. Curious, I decided to see if it fit any of the doors upstairs. I went floor by floor. Each lock clicked shut or didn't turn until I reached the 5th floor. There was a small office at the end of the hall, one that hadn't been used in years. I slid the key into the lock. Surprisingly, it turned. The door creaked open. Inside, the office was dusty, filled with old filing cabinets. But then I noticed something strange. A chair had been pulled out, facing the door. Papers were scattered on the desk, as if someone had been working there recently. I stepped inside, heart racing. As soon as I did, the door slammed shut behind me. I ran to the door, tried the handle. It was locked. Then I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps circling the room. No lights were on. My flashlight trembled in my hand, and when I turned it toward the center of the room, I saw a figure, a man, pale, thin, hunched over, staring at me. I scrambled to the window, trying to break it, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps grew closer, and a whisper came from behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I finally managed to open the door with the key again and ran down the stairs. When I got to the lobby, the key was gone. The next day, the maintenance staff confirmed that office had been sealed for years. No one had entered it. I never found out where the key came from, or who, or what, had been waiting in that office. I worked the night shift at a mid-sized corporate office. Most nights were quiet, and my job mostly consisted of walking the floors, checking doors, and monitoring security cameras. One night, around 2 a.m., I was patrolling the third floor when I noticed that the conference room at the end of the hall had its lights on. That was impossible. The room was always empty at night, and the switch was broken. I approached slowly, my flashlight cutting through the dim hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the long table in the center of the room. Chairs were pulled out as if someone had been sitting there recently. I called out, "Hello." No response. I stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, and I could see my breath in the air. The chairs hadn't been touched in months. The layer of dust on them confirmed it. But now, each chair was pulled out slightly, angled toward the center of the table. Then I heard it, faint scratching, coming from the far corner of the room. I shined my flashlight there. Nothing. The scratching grew louder, circling the room, echoing against the walls. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I ran to it, but it wouldn't open. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, deliberate whisper. "You shouldn't be here." I slammed into the door repeatedly until it finally gave way. I ran down the hall, heart racing, until I reached the stairwell. The next morning, the building manager checked the conference room. Nothing had been disturbed. No chairs moved. No signs anyone had been inside. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk past an empty conference room late at night, I feel like the chairs are angled toward me, waiting. I worked the night shift at a small accounting office. Most nights were quiet, the only sounds being the hum of computers and the occasional creak of the building settling. My job was to monitor the office and make sure all systems were running smoothly. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I walked past the printing area and noticed the office printer was running. Strange, it hadn't been scheduled to print anything. I approached, and the printer spit out a single sheet. I picked it up. It was blank. I shrugged and went back to my desk, but 5 minutes later, the printer whirred again. This time, a second sheet slid out. I looked at it. Words were typed across the page, perfectly neat. "You're not alone." I froze. The office was empty. I double-checked the security cameras. Nothing. No one entered or left. I tried to ignore it and return to my work. Minutes later, the printer ran again. Another sheet, another message. "I'm watching you." Panic set in. I grabbed the sheet and ran to the lobby, planning to leave the building. But as I reached the front door, the printer ran again. Another message. "Don't leave." I called security. They checked the printer remotely. No jobs had been sent. The logs showed nothing. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I quit the night shift immediately. Even now, the sound of a printer starting up in an empty office makes my stomach drop, and I swear I can hear faint typing, even when no one is around. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized law office. Most of my nights were quiet, filled with filing, monitoring the security cameras, and walking the halls to make sure everything was locked and secure. The office had an old wing that had been mostly abandoned for years, locked doors, dusty floors, and a filing room that no one ever used. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking past that wing when I noticed something strange. The door to the old filing room was slightly open. That was impossible. I had checked it during my last round, and it had been locked. I approached cautiously, flashlight in hand. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the room was dark, musty, and filled with rows of filing cabinets. Everything looked untouched, until I noticed one drawer pulled open slightly. I stepped closer. The air grew colder with every step. The drawer slowly slid open further, as if someone, or something, was inside, moving it. I reached for the handle, and that's when I heard it, a soft scraping behind me, like fingernails on the floor. I froze. The sound circled the room. I shined my flashlight around. Nothing. The cabinets, the walls, the floor, empty. Then a whisper. "Why are you here?" I spun around. Nothing. I grabbed the drawer and slammed it shut. The room went silent. I ran out of the office and locked the door behind me. The next morning, I told the manager what had happened. He said the old wing had been sealed for years and no one had keys. Security cameras confirmed no one had entered that room at all. I quit shortly after that night. Even now, whenever I think about filing rooms, closets, or abandoned offices, I get the same icy feeling that someone, or something, is waiting silently, just out of sight, watching and knowing I shouldn't be there. I worked the night shift at a small shipping warehouse. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. My job was simple. Check inventory, monitor the security cameras, and make sure no one entered the building after hours. One night, around 1 a.m., I heard the sound of a delivery truck pulling up outside. That was strange. No shipments were scheduled for that late. I went to the loading dock to check, but the area was empty. No truck, no driver, nothing. Shrugging it off, I returned to my office. 15 minutes later, I noticed the security monitors flicker. On the feed, the loading dock doors were open, even though I was certain I had locked them. And there, on the dock, was a single pallet I hadn't seen before. I grabbed a flashlight and went to inspect it. The pallet was stacked with boxes, all labeled with numbers I didn't recognize. As I bent down to check the labels, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I spun around. Nobody was there. I turned back to the pallet. One of the boxes had shifted. I picked it up and noticed it wasn't full of supplies. It contained stacks of photographs. I flipped through them and froze. The photos were of the warehouse, taken that very night. And in each photo, someone was standing in the background, always just at the edge of the frame. Pale, thin, featureless, watching. I dropped the photos. The footsteps behind me started again, circling closer. I ran toward the door. The pallet toppled over on its own, blocking my path. I dove around it and sprinted to the lobby. The next morning, the security cameras were reviewed. No delivery truck. No pallet. No boxes. No one entered the warehouse after the evening shift had ended. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear the sound of footsteps in an empty building, I feel that same cold weight behind me, just waiting. I worked the night shift at a corporate office building. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check the doors, and monitor the security cameras. Most nights were quiet, almost painfully so. One night, around 2 a.m., I noticed something strange on one of the monitors. The feed from a camera covering the main hallway on the second floor was completely static. That was unusual. These cameras rarely went offline. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check the hallway. The lights were flickering slightly, but everything seemed normal. I approached the area the camera covered. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. Nothing moved. I returned to the security office to reset the camera feed. When the image came back, my stomach dropped. The hallway looked exactly as I had seen it moments ago, but now, a shadowy figure was standing at the far end, perfectly still, facing me. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I yelled, "Hello." The figure didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, it tilted its head. My radio crackled with static, and when I glanced back at the monitor, the figure was gone. I went to the hallway again, empty. No footprints. No shadows. I finished my rounds quickly, but the sense of being watched didn't leave me. Around 3 a.m., I noticed the second-floor camera was offline again. I never stayed for another full night shift after that. Even now, whenever I walk through an empty hallway at night, I can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is standing at the far end, watching, waiting for me to notice. I worked nights at a large medical administration building. Not a hospital, just the place where all the paperwork went. The building was old, full of long corridors, outdated offices, and a basement level that most employees avoided. One of my tasks was to walk each floor every couple of hours, checking that doors were locked and lights were off. Simple enough. One night, around 2:15 a.m., I was patrolling the basement when I noticed a door I had never seen before. It was tucked between two old storage rooms, unmarked, painted the same dull beige as the walls. I swear that door had never been there. Curious, I tried the handle. It turned easily. Inside was a small office, dusty, dim, and ice cold. A desk sat in the center, covered in papers. A single lamp flickered weakly, casting shadows that moved like they had weight. I approached the desk and picked up one of the papers. It was a patient record, but the name, the date, everything on it was wrong, distorted, like the letters had been written by someone who didn't fully understand language. As I lifted another sheet, I heard a soft tapping behind me. I turned. No one was there. Then the tapping started again, this time coming from beneath the desk. I crouched slowly and shined my flashlight underneath. In the darkness, I saw a hand. Pale. Thin. Fingers tapping the floor one by one. As the light hit it, the hand withdrew swiftly, like it had crawled back into a crack in the wall. I stumbled backward, knocking the lamp over. The room plunged into darkness. Something exhaled right behind me, a long, rattling breath that wasn't human. I bolted through the door and slammed it shut behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. When I returned with the building manager the next morning, the hallway wall was solid. No door. No room. No desk. No papers. There was no record that such a room had ever existed. I never went back down to the basement again. And sometimes, in completely silent places, I still hear that tapping, soft, patient, waiting. I worked the night shift at a corporate office. Most nights were uneventful, quiet floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and the occasional sound of the HVAC system settling. My job was to monitor the security cameras, check the doors, and walk the floors every hour. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I noticed something unusual on the cameras. The conference room on the 5th floor had its lights on. That was impossible. Meetings never happened at night, and the room's switch was old and disconnected. Curious, I decided to investigate. I took the stairs up to the 5th floor. As I approached the hallway, the lights flickered sporadically. The door to the conference room was slightly open. I stepped inside. The table was set for a meeting. Chairs pulled out, notebooks open, pens placed neatly beside each chair. A low hum filled the room, like a projector running, but the projector was off. I called out, "Hello." Silence. Then I noticed something on the far side of the room, a figure sitting in the corner, slouched, completely still. Its face was hidden, but I could feel its gaze on me. I froze. Slowly, the figure rose. It didn't walk toward me, it glided. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, almost mechanical. The lights flickered with every step it took, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I grabbed the handle, locked. I fumbled for my radio. Dead. The figure stopped in the center of the room. Then it tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I screamed, and the door suddenly unlocked. I bolted down the hallway, never looking back. The next morning, the building manager checked the 5th floor conference room. Everything was exactly as it had always been. Chairs tucked in, table clean, no notebooks, no pens. The lights and projector were off. I quit that night. Even now, when I pass a conference room late at night, I feel like someone, or something, is waiting silently for me to enter, ready to remind me I shouldn't be there. I worked the night shift at a small law firm. Most nights were quiet, just me, the hum of the computers, and the occasional creak of the building settling. The janitor usually started around 1 a.m., but that night, I hadn't seen him yet. Around 12:45 a.m., I noticed a faint sound, the scraping of a mop on the floor. Strange, I thought. I was the only one in the building. I called out, but there was no response. I went to investigate. The hallway was empty. The janitor's closet door was closed, and the lights in the lobby flickered as I passed. Then I heard it again, the scraping, closer this time, coming from the floor above. I cautiously climbed the stairs. At the top, the hallway was empty, but the janitor's cart was there, wheels locked, mops and buckets perfectly in place. Yet the scraping continued, now behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I felt a cold pressure on my neck, like someone standing right behind me. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Then I saw it, a shadow, moving across the wall, but not cast by anything I could see. It lingered, stretching, contorting, until it seemed to crouch at the edge of my vision, watching. I ran down the stairs and locked the lobby door behind me. The sound stopped immediately. The next morning, the day janitor told me the night janitor had called out sick. No one had been in the building. Security cameras confirmed it. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear the scraping of a mop in an empty hallway, I feel that same cold weight behind me, and I know something is still there, waiting, just out of sight. I worked the night shift as a security officer at an old office building. The building was mostly empty after 10 p.m., with only the occasional cleaning staff or maintenance worker around. My job was simple: check doors, walk the floors, and monitor the security cameras. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I was doing my routine sweep of the 3rd floor. The hallway was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long shadows against the walls. That's when I noticed something unusual on the security monitors. A door at the end of the hall, one that should have been locked, was slightly open. I walked toward it, my flashlight cutting through the dark. The air grew colder as I approached. When I reached the door, I peered inside. The office was empty, chairs tucked in, computers off, but the faint sound of typing echoed from the back corner. I froze. My radio crackled, but no one responded. I slowly moved toward the sound, every step echoing unnaturally in the silent hall. As I reached the corner, the typing stopped abruptly. Then I saw it, a shadow, crouched low, just behind a row of desks. It wasn't human. Thin, elongated limbs, a pale face obscured by shadows, watching me. I tried to step back, but the door slammed shut on its own. I rattled the handle. Locked. The shadow moved closer, gliding silently along the floor. I grabbed my flashlight and waved it wildly. The shadow vanished. I didn't wait to find out if it would return. I ran down the stairs and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, the building manager checked the third floor. No one had entered. No one was supposed to have a key. Security cameras confirmed it. The hallway had been empty all night. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk alone in a dark hallway, I feel the same presence watching, crouched just out of sight, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a mid-sized marketing firm. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. My job was to check the security cameras, walk the floors, and make sure all doors were locked. One night, around 12:45 a.m., I noticed something unusual on the monitor. The door to one of the offices on the fourth floor, a room that had been vacant for months, was slightly open. That was impossible. I had locked it during my previous rounds. Curious, I went up to the fourth floor. The hallway was dark, the fluorescent lights flickering in a slow, erratic rhythm. I approached the office slowly. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the office was completely empty. The desk was dusty, the chairs pushed in, the computer off. But then I noticed the faint sound of typing coming from the corner of the room. I froze. I shined my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. No one. But then I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow sliding across the wall, just for a fraction of a second. I backed toward the door. As soon as I stepped away, the door slammed shut on its own. I tried the handle. Locked. Then I felt it, a presence behind me, cold and heavy, like someone was standing close enough to touch. I turned slowly. Nothing. The typing continued, faint, deliberate, coming from the empty desk. I slammed the door with all my strength, and it finally gave way. I ran down the stairs, heart pounding, and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, the building manager checked the office. Nothing had been disturbed. Dust on the desk remained untouched, the computer was off, and the security cameras showed no one entering or leaving that room all night. I quit that shift and never returned. Even now, whenever I walk past an empty office at night, I feel like someone is typing behind me, just out of sight, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a small office building that stored old files, office supplies, and outdated equipment. Most nights were quiet. Too quiet. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 1:50 a.m., I passed by the supply closet on the second floor. It was supposed to be locked, but the door was slightly ajar. Odd, I thought. I had checked it during my last round. I called out, "Hello." No response. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly pushed the door open. The closet was cramped, filled with boxes, paper, and old office chairs stacked haphazardly. As I stepped inside, I heard a faint whisper. "Don't look." I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The air felt colder, heavier. I turned toward the corner of the closet and saw nothing. Then the whisper came again, this time louder. I see you. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The closet felt impossibly small, like the shadows were closing in around me. I fumbled for my radio, but it crackled with static. Suddenly, a box shifted on its own. Then another. One by one, boxes slid across the floor toward me. I ran. My flashlight fell, spinning across the floor, illuminating a pale face just above the boxes, staring at me. Featureless. Silent. I bolted out of the closet and slammed the door behind me. The whispering stopped immediately. The next morning, I told the building manager. He insisted the closet had been locked for weeks and no one else had access. Security cameras confirmed it. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I pass a supply closet or storage room in an empty building, I feel that same heavy presence, and I can't shake the memory of the whisper. I see you. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized insurance office. Most nights were quiet, the only sounds being the hum of computers and the occasional creak of the building settling. My job was to monitor security cameras, check doors, and ensure the building stayed secure. One night, around 2 a.m., I walked past the break room and noticed the office copier was running. Strange, it hadn't been scheduled to print anything. I approached cautiously. The machine whirred and spit out a single sheet of paper. I picked it up. Blank. I shrugged it off and went back to my desk. Minutes later, the copier started again. Another sheet came out. This time, words appeared. Why are you here? I froze. The office was empty. I checked the security cameras. No one entered the break room. The copier ran again. Another sheet. Don't move. Panic set in. I grabbed the sheet and went to the door, but the door handle rattled in my hand, like someone was trying to keep it shut. I spun around. Nothing. The machine ran one last time. A sheet came out with a single word. Alone. I didn't wait. I bolted out of the building and didn't stop until I was in my car. The next morning, the office manager checked the copier. No paper was inside, and the print queue showed nothing. Security cameras confirmed no one had entered the break room after the evening shift. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a printer or copier start up in an empty office, my heart races and I can't help but imagine something, or someone, watching, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a small logistics office. The building had 3 floors, but the basement was rarely used, just storage, old equipment, and a few filing cabinets. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and monitor security cameras. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I heard the basement alarm go off. Strange, I was the only one in the building, and the basement door was supposed to be locked. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the narrow stairs. The basement was dark, the only light coming from the flickering emergency bulbs. The alarm had stopped, but a faint, scraping sound echoed from the far corner. I froze. As I approached, I saw that one of the filing cabinets was slightly open. I could hear faint whispering, but couldn't make out any words. The air was colder here than anywhere else in the building. I shined my flashlight around the room. Nothing. Then the whispering stopped. I bent down to check the cabinet. Papers inside had been moved, stacked neatly in piles I hadn't left them in. Suddenly, I felt something brush past my shoulder. I spun around, empty. The scraping sound started again, circling the basement. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief darkness, I could have sworn I saw a pale figure standing near the stairs, watching me. I didn't wait to investigate further. I bolted up the stairs and locked the basement door behind me. The next morning, the building manager confirmed the basement had been locked all night. Security cameras showed no one entering. The filing cabinets had been untouched all evening. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a faint scraping in an empty building, I remember the basement and the figure that may still be lurking down there, waiting for someone foolish enough to check the alarm. I worked the night shift at a mid-sized consulting firm. Most nights were uneventful, filled with monitoring the security cameras, checking doors, and patrolling the floors. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking the 5th floor when I noticed something strange on the security monitor. A conference room door at the far end of the hallway, one I had never seen before, was slightly open. Curious, I went to investigate. The hallway was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long shadows. The door looked normal, except there had never been a conference room in that spot. I pushed it open. Inside, the room was set up for a meeting. Chairs around the table, notebooks and pens neatly arranged, a projector on. The lights flickered. I called out, but there was no response. Then I saw it, a figure sitting at the head of the table. Pale, thin, hunched forward, completely still. Its head lifted slightly, and I felt it looking directly at me. I backed toward the door. It slammed shut on its own. I rattled the handle. It was locked. The figure began to rise, gliding toward me. The lights flickered faster, shadows dancing across the walls in impossible shapes. I screamed and slammed my shoulder into the door. It gave way, and I ran down the hall, my flashlight bouncing wildly. When I looked back, the door and the room was gone. Just a blank wall. The next morning, the floor plan confirmed it. No conference room had ever existed in that hallway. Security cameras showed nothing entering or leaving that area all night. I quit that night. Even now, when I walk past empty hallways late at night, I can't shake the feeling that a room might suddenly appear, chairs neatly arranged, waiting for me to enter and never leave. I worked the night shift at a financial office. The building was old, with long hallways, dark corners, and security cameras that only covered the main floor. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and monitor the cameras. One night, around 1:45 a.m., I noticed something strange on the monitor. An office door on the 3rd floor, one that had been empty for months, was wide open. I went to check. The hallway was silent, the flickering lights casting long shadows. When I reached the office, it was empty: desk, chairs, computer, everything untouched. But the temperature in the room was frigid, my breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. As I stepped closer, I noticed something impossible. The office chair slowly turned to face me. No one was sitting in it. I froze. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping, like fingernails on the desk. I backed away slowly. The tapping continued, moving closer, circling me. I ran to the door. It wouldn't open. The tapping stopped. Then a whisper came from the empty chair. "I've been waiting." The door suddenly unlocked. I bolted down the hallway and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, the office manager checked the 3rd floor. No one had been there, and the security cameras confirmed it. The chair hadn't moved, the desk was untouched, and the computer was off. I quit that night. Even now, when I pass an empty office at night, I feel the same presence watching, waiting silently, and I can't shake the memory of the chair turning to face me, all on its own. I worked the night shift at a small administrative office. Most nights were uneventful: quiet floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and the hum of the building settling. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 2 a.m., I noticed the door to the supply room on the 2nd floor was slightly open. That was impossible. I had checked it during my last round, and it had been locked. Curious, I approached. The hallway was silent, except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. I pushed the door open. Inside, everything looked normal: shelves of paper, office supplies, cleaning materials. But the air was cold, unnaturally so. I noticed a single chair in the center of the room had been pulled out. It wasn't there before. I stepped closer. Then I heard it, a soft scratching, coming from the far corner. I shined my flashlight toward it. Nothing. The scratching grew louder, moving closer to me. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the wall. I froze. Something, or someone, was standing just out of the light's reach, watching me. I ran. As I slammed the door behind me, the scratching stopped. My heart was pounding. The next morning, the office manager checked the supply room. Nothing had been disturbed. No chair had been moved, no boxes knocked over. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving the room that night. I quit that shift immediately. Even now, whenever I pass a supply room in an empty building, I feel that same presence lurking in the shadows, waiting silently, just out of reach. I worked the night shift at a small insurance office. Most nights were quiet, the only sounds coming from computers left running and the occasional hum of the air conditioning. My job was to monitor the office, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 1:30 a.m., the phone on my desk rang. Strange, it was the middle of the night, and no calls were expected. I picked it up. Silence. I waited. Then a whisper came through, soft and deliberate. "I'm here." I froze. The line went dead. Thinking it was a prank, I ignored it and continued my rounds. 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same whisper. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking the empty office, trying to find someone, anyone. The lights flickered as I moved down the hall. I called out, but no one responded. Then I heard it, a soft tapping behind me, like fingernails on a desk. I spun around. Nothing. The office was empty. I returned to my desk, but the phone rang again. I answered. "You can't leave." The line went dead. I looked around. Every door in the office was locked. No windows were open. Security cameras showed no one else in the building. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a phone ring in an empty office, I feel that same icy presence behind me, and I remember the whisper that I'll never forget. "You can't leave." I worked the night shift at a corporate office building. Most nights were quiet, the only sounds coming from the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the floors settling. My job was to monitor security cameras, check doors, and patrol the building. One night, around 2:15 a.m., I took the elevator to the 5th floor to check some offices. When the doors closed, the elevator started moving, then suddenly jolted to a stop. The lights flickered and then went out completely. I pressed the emergency button. Silence. The elevator was completely dark. Then I heard it, a faint, dragging sound, coming from somewhere above. I shined my flashlight through the small window in the elevator door. Nothing. Suddenly, the elevator moved again, but not smoothly. It lurched from floor to floor, stopping at levels I hadn't pressed. The doors opened once, revealing an empty hallway. But as the doors closed again, I saw something at the far end, a pale figure standing perfectly still, staring at me. I slammed the emergency button again. The figure vanished. The elevator lurched violently and finally reached the 5th floor. The doors opened. No one was there. No footprints. Nothing. I ran out and didn't wait for the elevator to move again. The next morning, the building manager checked the logs. The elevator hadn't stopped at any floors except the ones I had pressed. No one else had been in the building. I quit shortly after. Even now, whenever I ride an elevator alone, I feel that same icy stare, and I can't shake the memory of the figure that shouldn't have been there. I worked the night shift at a large office building. My duties were simple: sort incoming mail, check that doors were locked, and patrol the empty floors. Most nights were uneventful, quiet, almost boring. One night, around 1:45 a.m., I entered the mailroom to organize the packages. As I reached for a stack of envelopes, I noticed a shadow move across the far wall. I froze. The mailroom was empty. Thinking it was my imagination, I continued sorting. The shadow moved again, sliding slowly along the wall, staying just out of the corner of my eye. I spun around. Nothing. Then I heard it, soft breathing behind me. I turned quickly. No one. The lights flickered. The shadow stretched across the room, growing larger, darker, more solid. I stepped back toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. I tried the handle, locked. The shadow shifted closer, and I could make out a pale, humanoid shape. No eyes, no mouth, just the vague outline of a figure leaning toward me. I slammed my shoulder into the door repeatedly until it finally opened. I ran down the hallway and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, the building manager checked the mailroom. Nothing had been disturbed. No one had entered, and the security cameras confirmed it. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I enter a mailroom or storage room in an empty building, I feel the same presence lurking in the corners, just out of sight, waiting silently. I worked the night shift at a small marketing firm. Most nights were quiet, hallways empty, computers off, and only the hum of the air conditioning to break the silence. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check the doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 2 a.m., I reached a hallway I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't on the building map, and I was sure I had checked every floor before. At the end of the hall was a single office door, slightly ajar, lights spilling faintly from inside. Curious, I approached. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The office was small, cluttered with dusty papers, stacks of old notebooks, and a single swivel chair in the center. A faint smell of mildew hung in the air. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. I tried the handle. It was locked. My flashlight flickered, then went out. In the darkness, I heard faint scratching sounds coming from the corner of the room. I froze. Then the scratching grew louder, circling the office. I could feel the air growing colder, heavier, pressing down on me. Finally, my flashlight flickered back on, and I saw it. A pale figure crouched in the corner, featureless, limbs contorted, staring directly at me. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze. I didn't wait to find out what it would do. I slammed my shoulder into the door, breaking the lock, and bolted down the hallway. When I looked back, the door and the hallway were gone. Just a blank wall. The next morning, the building manager confirmed that no such office existed. Security cameras showed no hidden hallway or room. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk down a quiet hallway in an office, I feel that same icy presence, and I can't shake the memory of the forgotten office that wasn't supposed to exist. I worked the night shift at a small corporate office. Most nights were uneventful, just quiet hallways, computers humming, and the occasional creak of the building settling. My job was to patrol the floors and ensure all doors and lights were secure. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I noticed something strange. The overhead light in one of the empty hallways flickered on and stayed lit, even though it had been off earlier and the switch was broken. Curious, I walked down the hallway. The light flickered as I moved, always staying a few feet ahead of me, as if it was following. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was a wiring issue, but the further I walked, the more the light seemed to anticipate my movements. When I reached the end of the hall, I saw a door slightly open. The light shone directly through the crack, spilling into the hallway. I stepped closer. The door led to an office I had never seen before. It wasn't on the floor plan. I pushed it open. The office was empty, desk, chairs, filing cabinets, but the light hovered in the center of the room, moving slightly, as if alive. Then I heard it, a soft whisper from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here." I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. I tried the handle, locked. The light moved toward me slowly, almost deliberately. I grabbed a chair and smashed the window, climbed out onto the fire escape, and didn't stop running until I was outside. The next morning, the building manager checked the hallway and the office. No office existed. The lights were all hardwired and off, and security cameras confirmed no one had entered the floor that night. I quit immediately. Even now, whenever I walk down an empty hallway, I can't shake the feeling that a light is watching me, moving just out of reach, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a small accounting firm. The building had a basement that stored old files, broken office furniture, and boxes of supplies. Most nights were quiet, too quiet. My job was to patrol the floors and check that everything was secure. One night, around 1:45 a.m., I passed the basement and noticed a faint glow coming from a small window near the back. Strange, the lights were off down there, and I was sure the basement door was locked. I grabbed my flashlight and carefully went down the stairs. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of mildew. The glow grew brighter as I approached the window. It wasn't coming from any light source I could see. It seemed to hover inside the basement. I reached the window and looked inside. The basement was empty, except for a figure standing at the far corner. Pale, hunched, completely still, facing me. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. I stepped back. The glow vanished. The figure moved slightly, gliding closer to the window. I felt an overwhelming pressure, like the air itself was pressing against me. I bolted up the stairs and locked the basement door. The glow never returned. The next morning, the building manager checked the basement. No lights were on, no one had been there, and security cameras confirmed it. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I see a small window in a dark, empty room, I feel that same icy stare, and I can't shake the memory of the figure that shouldn't have been there. I worked the night shift at a small accounting office. Most nights were uneventful, computers humming, the air conditioner running, and the occasional creak from the building settling. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 2 a.m., the office phone rang. Strange, because no calls were expected during the night. I picked it up. Silence. A soft whisper came through. "Don't look behind you." I froze. The office was empty. I laughed nervously, thinking someone was playing a prank. I hung up and continued my rounds. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I picked up. "I'm closer than you think." I spun around. shining my flashlight into the dark corners of the office. Nothing. The doors were locked, the windows closed. I felt a sudden chill, like icy breath on my neck. I tried the phone one more time. This time, a distorted voice said, "You shouldn't be here." I bolted out of the office and didn't stop running until I was outside. The next morning, the office manager checked the building. The phones had logged no incoming calls overnight. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a phone ring in an empty building, I can't shake the memory of the whispers and the cold sense that someone, or something, was standing just behind me, waiting. I worked the night shift at a law firm. The building was quiet after hours, with only the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure the office stayed secure. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I entered an empty office on the third floor. The room had a desk, a computer, and a single swivel chair. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed the chair. It had turned slightly, angled toward me, even though I had left it perfectly pushed in when I last walked by. I froze. I called out, but no one answered. The chair moved again, this time a little closer to the desk, like it was sliding across the floor on its own. My heart raced. I shined my flashlight around the room. Nothing else moved. Then I heard it, a faint scraping noise behind me, like fingernails on wood. I spun around. Empty hallway. The door I had entered through was wide open. I ran for the door, but when I glanced back, the chair had moved again. It now faced the door, as if blocking my escape. I bolted out of the office, never looking back. The next morning, the building manager checked the office. The chair was in its normal position. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving that room overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I see an empty office chair in a dark, quiet room, I feel that same unsettling presence, and I can't shake the memory of the chair moving on its own, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized office building. Most nights were uneventful, the floors empty, computers off, and the hum of the HVAC system the only sound. My job was to patrol the building and check that all doors were secure. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard the distinct whirring of a printer coming from the basement. Strange, no one was supposed to be down there, and the printer had been unplugged at the end of the previous shift. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously descended the stairs. The basement was dark, cold, and smelled of damp paper. The printer was running, slowly feeding out sheets of paper. I picked up the first page. It was blank. The second page slid out. On it, typed neatly in capital letters, were the words, "I see you." My hands shook. I looked around. Empty shelves, stacked boxes, nothing that could have printed this. A third sheet emerged. "Don't leave." The lights flickered, and I noticed movement at the far end of the basement. A pale figure, hunched, featureless, standing perfectly still. My flashlight flickered and went out. I turned to run. The printer stopped on its own. The figure moved closer, gliding across the floor silently. I didn't wait. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. The next morning, the building manager checked the basement. The printer was off, no paper in the tray, and security cameras confirmed no one had been there overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a printer start up in an empty office, I get the same icy feeling, as if someone, or something, is watching, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a corporate office. Most nights were silent, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the floors settling. My job was to patrol the building, check doors, and make sure everything stayed secure. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I noticed movement on the security cameras. The janitor's cart was rolling down the hallway, but the night janitor wasn't on duty. I grabbed my flashlight and went to investigate. The hallway was empty. I found the cart at the far end, perfectly still, but the air felt colder than usual, heavy, almost oppressive. As I turned to leave, I saw a shadow shift along the wall. It moved independently of any light source, gliding toward me. I froze. The shadow stretched and twisted, forming a vague humanoid shape. Then I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing down the hall, but when I looked around, no one was there. I ran to the elevator, but the shadow seemed to follow, lingering at the edge of my vision. When I reached the lobby, it vanished. The cart was gone, and the hallway was empty. The next morning, the building manager checked the cameras. The footage showed the cart moving on its own, but no janitor ever appeared, and no one entered the building during my shift. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I see an empty janitor's cart or a shadow in an otherwise empty hallway, I feel the same oppressive weight, and I can't shake the memory of the figure that followed me, unseen, silent, waiting. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized office. The building was almost always empty after 10 p.m., leaving the floors quiet except for the hum of computers and flickering fluorescent lights. My job was to patrol, check doors, and make sure everything stayed secure. One night, around 2 a.m., I noticed something strange. One of the cubicles on the far end of the office had its chair turned to face the hallway. I was certain I had left it tucked in during my previous round. I approached cautiously. As I got closer, the chair slowly rotated on its own, stopping to face me directly. My heart started pounding. I shined my flashlight around the cubicle, empty. Nothing else moved. Then I felt it, a cold presence behind me, pressing down like the air itself had weight. I turned quickly, nothing. But when I looked back at the cubicle, the chair had moved slightly forward, as if leaning toward me. I heard a whisper, barely audible, coming from the cubicle. "I've been watching." I bolted for the exit, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The chair stayed perfectly still when I glanced back from the hallway, yet I could feel the presence following, just at the edge of my vision. The next morning, the office manager checked the cubicle. Everything was in its normal position. Security cameras confirmed no one had been there overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I see an empty office chair in a dark cubicle, I feel that same oppressive presence, and I can't shake the memory of the whisper. I've been watching. I worked the night shift at a corporate office building. Most nights were uneventful, just the hum of computers and air conditioning. My job was to patrol floors, check doors, and monitor security cameras. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I decided to take the elevator from the lobby to the third floor. As soon as the doors closed, the elevator lurched violently and the lights flickered. It stopped between floors. I pressed the emergency button. Silence. Then I heard it, a faint whisper coming from above. "Don't get off." I froze. The elevator groaned, and a shadow appeared at the far end, stretching across the walls. I couldn't see a face, just a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still. The elevator jolted again and began moving, but not smoothly. It stopped at floors I hadn't pressed. The doors opened once to an empty hallway, dimly lit, with shadows that seemed to reach for me. I pressed the button for the lobby repeatedly, but the figure seemed to glide along the walls, keeping pace. Finally, the elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. The hallway was empty. I bolted out and didn't stop running until I was outside. The next morning, security footage showed nothing unusual. No one entered the elevator except me, and the floors it stopped at appeared empty the entire night. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I ride an elevator alone, I feel the same cold presence, as if something unseen is watching and waiting for me to make a wrong move. I worked the night shift at a small tech firm. Most nights were quiet, filled only with the hum of computers and the occasional creak of the floors settling. My job was to patrol the offices, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I entered an empty office to make a quick check. As I walked past a desk, my flashlight flickered, and then the keyboard typed on its own. I froze. I leaned closer. The monitor lit up, displaying a single line. "Why are you here?" My heart raced. I stepped back. The keyboard typed again, faster this time. "You shouldn't be alone." I backed out of the office, and the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to open it. It was locked. Then I heard it, faint scratching sounds coming from the office. Slow at first, then faster, like nails scraping the desk. My flashlight flickered wildly, and in that brief light, I could have sworn I saw a shadow crouched over the desk, staring at me. I slammed the door with my shoulder and ran down the hallway. The sound stopped immediately. The next morning, the building manager checked the office. The computer was off. The keyboard was untouched. Security cameras confirmed that no one had entered the room overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I pass an empty office with a computer on, I feel the same icy stare and can't shake the memory of the office that seemed to answer back. I worked the night shift at a small law office. Most nights were quiet. The only sounds were the hum of computers and the occasional creak of the building settling. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and monitor security cameras. One night, around 2 a.m., I walked past the copy room. The copier, which had been off, suddenly turned on by itself. A single sheet slid out. I picked it up, blank. I frowned and stepped closer. The machine started again, spitting out another sheet. This one had words typed on it. "I see you." I froze. The office was empty. I checked the cameras. No one had entered the floor. Another sheet came out. "You shouldn't be here." Panic set in. I grabbed my flashlight and approached the copier cautiously. That's when I saw it. A shadow in the corner of the room, tall and thin, featureless, standing perfectly still. I could feel its gaze on me, icy and oppressive. I stumbled back, and the copier stopped. The shadow didn't move, but I could sense it shifting closer, just at the edge of my vision. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door behind me. The next morning, the office manager checked the copy room. The machine was off, no paper in the tray, and security cameras confirmed no one had entered the room overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a copier start up in an empty office, I feel that same cold presence, and I can't shake the memory of the shadow waiting silently in the corner. My first official job at 15 was hosting at a steakhouse. I had one manager who was genuinely kind, funny, strict when he needed to be, and insanely efficient. And then there was the other manager. The exact opposite, lazy, grumpy, and worst of all, incredibly inappropriate with me and the two other minors who worked there. But that's not even what this story is about. It's summer, and guess which one of these two managers earned an all-expenses-paid company trip to Vegas? Yeah, definitely not the hardworking one. He had to stay behind and basically run the entire restaurant alone. A few days before the trip, the useless manager, let's call him Mr. Bum, is doing his usual thing, wandering around and trying to chat up all the teenage staff. He talks about all the trouble he's going to get into, makes stripper jokes none of us understand, and even promises to bring me back a souvenir shot glass so I can have my first sip of alcohol with him when he returns. Gross on every level. He was supposed to be gone for a week. That week passes. Then another. I wasn't exactly upset he wasn't coming back, but I felt awful for my good manager, who was basically working doubles non-stop with zero help. He kept trying to call the owner, the owner's wife, their daughter who worked there occasionally, and of course, Mr. Bum himself. Nothing. Not a single response. Eventually, he remembers an emergency contact from Mr. Bum. Thank God she actually answered the phone. We were never 100% sure what her exact relationship was, but based on everything, it was safe to assume they were sharing a bed. She explained that authorities from nearly across the country had contacted her, and that she had no idea he was even in Vegas, or where his mini dill pickle had been sleeping that night. Since I was still a minor, my good manager didn't want to tell me the whole story at first. He just said Mr. Bum wouldn't be coming back before summer ended, so I probably wouldn't see him again. But thankfully, the Salvadoran cooks in the back were more than willing to fill in the details once the news spread. Turns out this balding, sweaty, Axe body spray drenched, gumball machine chain wearing man, and the owner of the entire company, had hired 3 paid actors of the night. They were driving around a busy part of town in a rental car, all of them heavily intoxicated. At some point, he propositioned his favorite actor to start their performance on his, no doubt unimpressive and equally sweaty, equipment. And that's when the man-child passed out. The owner was already knocked out in the back seat. Because this genius couldn't handle the services he paid for, he fell asleep with his foot pressing down on the gas. The car jumped the curb, plowed onto the sidewalk, and hit 2 young women, one of whom was carrying a very small child. The woman holding the child became pinned between the vehicle and a nearby building. She didn't survive. Last I heard, the child was still in the ICU, but I never got an update after that. I really hope he pulled through. I don't even know Mr. Bum's full name. Only the sarcastic nicknames I used for him. Otherwise, I'd make damn sure he was still in prison where he belongs. I never got that shot glass he promised, but at least I never had to see him again. Piece of shit. I worked in a hospital for 3 years, and while this story isn't exactly supernatural, it shook me so deeply that I'll never forget it. I was on the morning shift. The night shift had admitted a patient who was pre-final/final. In other words, he was dying, and it was likely he wouldn't make it through the morning. Because I was the nurse in training, which apparently meant I was the designated do every unpleasant job person, I was assigned to make sure he didn't die alone. I was supposed to check on him regularly and stay with him if the time came. 5 hours into the shift, I walked into his room. As I approached his bed, his eyes suddenly opened and looked straight at me. His already faint breathing grew even weaker. Then, he took one long breath, exhaled, and went completely still. His eyes closed, his arms went limp, and the room went silent. I stood there waiting, 15 seconds, then 20. No movement. No sound. I was sure he was gone. I took a step away from the bed, ready to go alert the staff, and that's when he exploded upward. He jolted upright with a deep, rattling gasp and stared right into my eyes before collapsing back onto the pillows, returning to his shallow, irregular breathing like nothing had happened. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I was absolutely convinced he had passed. The rest of the shift was normal after that. When I left at 14:30, he was still hanging on. The next morning, when I came in, we were told he had passed away around 3 p.m., just 30 minutes after my shift ended. I work on the 2nd floor of an office building. There's an elevator in the lobby, but you can't actually reach our floor without a code. We've also got a Ring camera, and visitors can buzz up to the receptionist to be let in. One day, the receptionist heads out for lunch and asks me to keep an eye on the Ring while she's gone. No problem. A little while later, the ring goes off. I answer, and there's a man in his mid-30s standing in the lobby. I ask how I can help him, and he says he wants to speak to someone in management. When I ask what it's about, he says he has a complaint about one of the stores our company owns. Flashback a few days. Earlier that week, I had spoken with that store's manager. He told me about a guy they'd had to kick out for being creepy around kids. What he did wasn't technically illegal, but it was disturbing enough that they banned him. Out of curiosity, I did some sleuthing, figured out who he was, and looked him up on social media. Back to the lobby. The guy on the ring? Same creepy dude. I recognized him immediately. Nosiness does pay off sometimes. I stall, telling him I'm tracking down a manager to speak with him. As I'm watching him on the camera, he shifts just enough for me to notice a gun tucked into his waistband. I call 911. The police arrive fast. He does have a concealed carry permit, but we have a big, "No firearms" sign posted at the entrance. The officers ask why he's bringing a gun into an office building in the first place. In the end, they let him go, and nothing else happened. But I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't been the one watching the ring that day. I worked the night shift at a small consulting firm. Most nights were quiet, hallways empty, computers off, and only the hum of the air conditioning to break the silence. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check the doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 3 a.m., I noticed one of the office doors on the second floor slightly ajar. That was impossible. I had checked all doors during my previous round, and this one had been locked. Curious, I approached. The hallway was dim, lit only by flickering fluorescent lights. I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the office appeared normal at first: desk, chairs, computer, and stacks of papers. But the air was frigid, colder than anywhere else in the building. I felt a heaviness pressing down on me, like something unseen was in the room. Then I saw it: a pale figure sitting in the corner, completely still, head slightly tilted, staring at me. Its eyes were black holes. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut. I rattled the handle. It was locked. The figure rose slowly, gliding toward me, stretching unnaturally. I grabbed a chair and smashed the window, climbing onto the fire escape. The figure didn't follow, but I could feel it watching me from inside. The next morning, the building manager confirmed that no such office existed on that floor. Security cameras showed nothing unusual. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk past an office late at night, I feel that same heavy presence, as if something unseen is staring, waiting for me to notice. I worked the night shift at a small law firm. Most nights were quiet, with only the hum of the computers and the occasional creak of the building settling. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I entered the records room to organize files. It was a small room with shelves packed tightly with folders. Everything looked normal, until I noticed a stack of files on one shelf had fallen over. Odd, I thought. I was the only one in the building. I bent down to pick them up, and suddenly the stack rose slightly off the shelf on its own, as if an invisible hand had grabbed it. My flashlight flickered. A soft whisper came from the far corner of the room. "Don't touch them." I froze. The air grew colder, heavier. Shadows stretched across the walls unnaturally. Another stack of files toppled over, this time sliding toward me across the floor. I ran, slamming the door behind me. The whispering stopped, and the files were still. The next morning, the building manager checked the records room. Everything was in place. The fallen files had somehow returned to their original positions. Security cameras showed no one entering or leaving the room overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I enter a room full of files or boxes in an empty building, I feel that same icy presence, and I can't shake the memory of the files that moved on their own, as if warning me to leave. I worked the night shift at a small marketing office. Most nights were quiet, hallways empty, computers off, and only the hum of the air conditioning. My job was to patrol the floors, check doors, and monitor security cameras. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps behind me in the hallway. I froze and called out, but there was no response. The building was empty except for me. I continued walking, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. The footsteps continued, soft, deliberate, following my every step, stopping when I stopped, starting when I moved. I reached the end of the hallway and turned a corner. The footsteps echoed right behind me. I spun around. Empty hallway. Nothing. I tried to reach the security office to check the cameras. As I ran, the lights flickered, and I saw shadows stretching along the walls, elongated, unnatural, moving independently. The footsteps were closer now, faster, yet I never saw anyone. When I finally reached the security office, I checked the cameras. Nothing. No one was on the floor, no movement registered, except for the hallway where I had been. There, in the footage, I saw a dark figure following me from just out of view, but whenever I turned on the camera, the figure vanished. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk alone down a quiet hallway, I hear footsteps behind me that stop when I stop, start when I move, and I can't shake the feeling that something unseen is always following. I worked at a small publishing company that had an old, unfinished basement they used for storage. Nobody liked going down there. The lights buzzed, the floors were uneven, and the air always smelled like damp concrete. Still, the basement had the only break room with a working microwave, so during night shifts, I had no choice but to use it. One night around 2:15 a.m., I went down there for a quick meal. The basement was silent except for the hum of the lone fluorescent light over the break room door. As I walked in, I noticed something odd. The chairs around the table were arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward. That wasn't how we left them. I didn't want to think about it, so I microwaved my food and sat with my back to the wall. Halfway through eating, I heard something drag across the concrete outside the break room. A slow, scraping sound, like a chair being pulled. I stepped out into the open area. One of the chairs in the circle had moved. It was now pointed directly at the break room door. I backed away. The sound came again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Another chair shifted slightly, turning toward me. Then another. I felt the air change, like something unseen was circling me, tightening the ring. I ran for the stairs, but the basement lights flickered violently. In the brief flashes, I saw all the chairs now facing me, perfectly aligned, as if waiting. I didn't look back again. I sprinted up the stairs and slammed the door behind me so hard the glass rattled. The next morning, one of the managers asked why the basement door was locked. I hadn't locked it. Later, when they went down to check, every chair was neatly placed under the table, normal, exactly how it should have been. But when I checked the security camera aimed at the stairwell, I saw something that made my stomach drop. At 2:23 a.m., the basement door eased open by itself, just a few inches, then slowly shut again. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I see a perfectly arranged circle of chairs, I get a cold feeling in my chest, remembering how slowly and deliberately they moved toward me in that basement. I used to work the late shift at a software company located on the 7th floor of an otherwise empty office building. After 10 p.m., the entire place was mine. Silent hallways, motionless cubicles, and the faint glow of exit signs reflecting off glass walls. Every night, part of my routine was to check that all conference rooms were empty. Most were dark, chairs pushed in, screens off. But conference room B always felt different, like the air was heavier, as if the room held its breath. One night around 1:45 a.m., as I turned the corner, I noticed the light under the door of conference room B. It was on. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes people forgot to turn off lights, but the door was slightly open. Unlocked. I pushed it open a little wider. Someone was sitting at the end of the long table, facing away from me, perfectly still. I calmly said I was security doing rounds. No reaction. I stepped inside and repeated myself. Still nothing. The figure didn't move, not a breath, not a twitch. Trying not to panic, I reached for the wall switch. The moment the lights came on, the room was empty. The chair was pushed in neatly. Nobody inside. No footprints on the carpet except mine. I told myself I was tired. Maybe I imagined it. Stress, dim lights, reflections, anything but what it looked like. But as I left and walked down the hallway, I heard the door behind me creak open. Slowly. Like someone pushing it with a fingertip. I turned around. The room was dark again. The door stood open just a few inches. Then I heard the chair at the far end of the table scrape across the floor, dragging into a new position. I ran straight to the main lobby and stayed there until sunrise. When the morning staff arrived, I asked them if anyone had been working late in that room. They told me the room had been locked for months. No one used it after a remodeling issue caused electrical problems. The key hung untouched on the wall. But the part that still makes my skin crawl. When we opened it that morning, the chair at the end of the table was pulled out slightly, as if someone had been sitting there all night, waiting for me to return. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized law office. Most nights were uneventful. The hum of the HVAC system and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights were the only sounds. My job was simple: patrol the floors, check doors, and make sure nothing unusual happened. One night, around 2:10 a.m., I walked past the copy room. The copier, which had been off, suddenly turned on by itself. I froze, thinking maybe someone had left it running. But the night cameras confirmed no one had entered the floor. Curious, I opened the door. The machine had finished printing a single page. I picked it up. Blank. As I leaned over the copier, I heard faint whispers. Not through the phone, not over the intercom, directly in the room. Turn around. I spun, flashlight in hand. Empty room. The whisper came again, louder. Don't leave. The copier began running again, spitting out sheet after sheet. On each page, words appeared, typed neatly, as if by invisible hands. I'm here. I see you. Why are you alone? A cold pressure filled the room. Shadows stretched along the walls, independent of the light from my flashlight. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. I grabbed the handle. Locked. My flashlight flickered and went out. In the darkness, I could feel movement circling me, slow, deliberate, and silent. I slammed my shoulder into the door. It burst open. I ran down the hallway and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, security checked the copy room. No one had entered overnight. The copier was off, and all the pages had vanished. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I hear a copier start on an empty floor, I feel that same icy presence and hear the whisper, "I see you." I worked the night shift at a small accounting firm in an old building. Most nights were uneventful, just me, the hum of computers, and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights. My job was to patrol the floors and check that all doors were locked. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I was walking past the finance department when I noticed an office door slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it earlier. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark except for the dim glow of a computer screen. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, and a chair sat pulled out slightly. It looked normal until I realized the chair had turned to face me. I backed toward the door, and it slammed shut. I rattled the handle. Locked. The computer screen flickered, then displayed a single message typed in bold letters. "Don't leave." A soft scratching sound began behind me, like fingernails on the floor. I spun around, nothing. The chair had moved again, closer to the door, as if it were blocking my escape. I grabbed the nearest stack of papers and threw it against the door. It gave way just enough for me to push through. I ran down the hallway and didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The next morning, the office manager checked the room. The chair was in its normal position. Security cameras showed no one had entered the office overnight. I quit that night. Even now, whenever I walk past an office at night and see a chair slightly out of place, I feel that same creeping sense of being watched and the memory of the door that closed behind me, trapping me with something unseen. I worked the 4 p.m. to midnight shift at a mill in a small town. It was physical, heavy work, so the place was mostly men. One night, this guy from a nearby department started standing in the doorway closest to my machine, just watching me. He'd do it for long stretches without saying a word. After a few nights of this, I told my manager. The guy stopped watching me directly for about a week, but then I noticed him wandering around my area, walking by slowly, lingering near other machines, always close enough to keep me on edge. I tried to ignore him while still keeping my guard up. A month passed. I'd repeatedly asked management to do something, but nothing changed. Then one night, the guy finally approached me and asked if I could give him a ride home. I told him no and made it clear he was making me uncomfortable and needed to stay away from my workspace. After that, a coworker started walking me to my car every night. Sure enough, the very first night he did, we found the man leaning against my vehicle. He backed off as soon as he saw I wasn't alone. A few days later, it happened again, but this time my coworker wasn't there. I turned right around, went back into the building, and found someone else to walk out with me. The next day, things escalated. I was at the local grocery store with my 2 kids. As I was getting ready to leave, the same man pulled up behind my car and blocked me in. I immediately locked the doors and rolled up my windows, manual locks, manual windows, the whole deal. I grabbed my work scissors from the console, just in case. He walked up to my window and said something was wrong with the back of my vehicle and that I needed to get out and look at it. I told him no, to leave, and I started laying on the horn to draw attention. That finally scared him off. Fast forward 2 weeks. The creepy man was arrested, along with his brother, for kidnapping, assaulting, and torturing a woman from the next town over. They had held her captive for 3 weeks before they were finally caught. To this day, I still think about how differently things could have gone.